I also wanted to talk a little bit about and do a postscript to the Teamsters and UPS and the vote that happened and the strike that wasn't. We did a Substack article on INN about it, indienewsnetwork.substack.com, put in the clip in the segment that we did last week. But I also kind of wrote and summarized that was what was in all the articles for someone so they don't have to claw through all of it and spend an hour and a half watching the whole thing. So we knew that the locals are going to have a vote from August 3rd through August 22nd or so. So all the locals offices did have a vote, and all like the heads of the locals had to decide whether to recommend the TA or not to their members. So what happened there? Well, originally on July 25th, of course, we know that 340,000 UPS workers reached a tentative agreement on the 5-year labor contract. At least union leadership did. Then on Monday, Teamsters took the next step forward to ratify how their local union barns, including Teamsters Local 89 in Louisville, voted 161-1 to endorse the TA. Despite everything that we said, all the holes, all the problems, everything, almost all of them, every single one got on board, except for one, which I thought that was really interesting, right? So what happened? Local 89, which
they're not watching.
Well, pretty much they weren't watching because one of the top 5 UPS barns, all right, which is based on combined ground and air membership, was the lone dissenting vote. Why? They didn't say, but the next day they retracted that and were like, no. We were objecting to something else, a procedural thing. We didn't actually mean to say to don't vote for the TA. No, not at all. And there's like the official statement, setting the record straight. They all got on board, 162-0. 162-0. This was not a vote against the contract itself, as some have speculated from the day the tentative agreement was announced. They have recognized this as a remarkable achievement. They all got in line. They all are singing the praises of Sean O'Brien. Nobody's questioning what happened here. Forget about everything that we said. Forget about the fact that they didn't actually get the $25 an hour or that the warehouses aren't getting air conditioning. Every single local got on board. Why? What happened? I don't really know.
They're going to go back to sleep.
But the union believed the new TA would allow UPS to remove MRAs. Like we said, on Monday, we hadn't gathered all the information. Local 89 now says with confidence that its members who receive MRAs will continue to receive it and also receive the general wage increases negotiated in the tentative agreement. So if UPS were to reduce MRAs, it'd be a violation of the National Master Agreement. With these details confirmed, Local 89 now officially and proudly recommends a yes vote. So basically, they just needed clarification on one thing, but the part-timers, the warehouse drivers, this was not a big win, and it's kind of upsetting. So I want to read what Luigi Morris, who is one of those part-timers that I'm talking about, wrote this week in Left Voice with Ben Douglas, which is that we can fight for more and asking them to vote no on the TA. So even though 162 local barns are recommending to vote yes, that doesn't mean that the rank and file are actually going to do it. Now, INN's Joe is works at the Air Hub in Philly, and
Meet Joe.
Yeah, that guy. He says that pretty much is a done deal at this point, which sucks. I'm heartbroken that these guys are getting not even a half measure. I would call it a quarter measure, because 5 years from now, this deal is going to be beyond awful. It's bad now. And they're screaming that it's the greatest deal in history. Right? So last week, 6 days before nearly 350,000 UPS workers were set to strike, the leadership of the IBT announced that they'd reached a TA with the company for a new 5-year contract. If UPS workers had gone on strike, they would have joined nearly 200,000 writers and actors currently on strike, fighting for their rights. right? Workers will now read over the agreement and vote between August 3rd and 22nd to either ratify or reject it. The contract has been hailed as a historic win by union leaders and Democratic Party politicians, but in many respects, the contract falls far short of what workers deserve. Also, what the barns promised their membership, by the way. They promised and they said $25 or we go strike. All right?
Which a lot of them aren't really getting.
None of them
even
are.
in this deal, right?
None of them, even after 5 years. He says, we are UPS workers. Luigi works as a part-time warehouse worker, and Ben is a former driver who's fighting to get his job back after being fired in retaliation for his union activism. We've been involved in strike preps, discussing with our coworkers, participating in union meetings, and flyering at our workplaces, sometimes as early as 3 a.m., while many part-timers clock in. We've been moved by the unprecedented support from students and other sectors of workers standing in solidarity with our demands, and by the practice pickets that gave the bosses a taste of our power. We are happy that people are finally talking about our terrible working conditions and the massive profits made from our labor. $8.6 billion in stock buybacks last year alone that could have gone to give these people more. As we continue to parse through all the details of the full tentative agreement and discuss with our coworkers, especially the most precarious among us, like warehouse drivers and helpers, it's clear that despite some important advances, this contract is far from historic and falls short on many counts, especially for the part-timers. There are 200,000 of the 340,000 are part-timers. The majority of the workforce is part-time, yet they're not really getting treated like they're the majority of the workforce. Right? So throughout the contract and strike campaign, our union has emphasized the need for us UPS workers to push back against the divisions of our classifications and fight with one fist. Just last week, Teamsters posted, right? Full-timers are standing up for part-timers because we are one union, no one gets left behind. It's time to make good on that promise. Unite our ranks, right, and fight for a no child left behind, right? So in that spirit, we urge our Teamsters siblings to vote no on this tentative agreement and use this unprecedented momentum to fight for a contract that truly leaves no one behind. Now, there have been some gains made, and he's conceding that for decades, UPS Teamsters have been subjected to concessionary contracts brokered by the old leadership of Jimmy Hoffa Jr., who cared more about playing nice with the bosses than delivering gains for the workers. Wages stagnated, UPS workers earned less money for the same work, conditions severely deteriorated inside the warehouses, and not only for the part-timers, but also for clerks, full-time helpers, and 22.4 drivers who were working terrible split shifts to avoid complete layoff. And we talked about that classification, which would be eliminated. So this contract campaign brought out important new energy into our ranks as we face the possibility of harnessing our power, not only to roll back previous concessions, but also to fight for more. Important demands were made to remove some of the worst contract language, the two-tier system among drivers, right? With forced overtime and layoffs, just to name a few, right? Sectors such as TDU, that's Teamsters for Democratic Union, they popularized the call for a $25 an hour wage for part-timers, which would meaningfully improve our lives. Right now, there's some of them, I think you're starting like $16.50. So, yeah, going to 21 is great. 23 after 5 years is good, but it's still not even enough to pay for like a two-bedroom apartment. The tentative agreement does make some important advances. And not only that, again, at 200,000 part-timers, all these employees have to have other jobs. This is like a moonlight economy, a gig economy.
Yep.
While UPS makes billions. They're basically, the workers are subsidizing UPS's profits. Tentative agreement does, like I said, make some advances, right? It would get rid of that 22.4 classification. Eliminates the most egregious aspects of the two-tier system. Get rid of the forced sixth punch, where workers can be forced to come in on a sixth day and work overtime. Newly purchased trucks will have air conditioning, and MLK will be a paid holiday. So those are good. However, one of the biggest tensions is that far from uniting the workforce to fight against a part-time poverty, it would continue to keep part-time workers precarious, maintaining a vast wage gap between drivers and warehouse workers. The broadest form of the two-tier system would be maintained, even though they keep saying they eliminated it, which is drastically different pay and conditions between full-time drivers and part-time workers that load, unload, and sort. Right? So
Yep.
Are
there full-time workers in those positions?
Yes.
Like at all?
Yes.
I feel like, okay, there should be a rule about that.
Well,
you know,
there are no rules on how many they have to have. And that was also part of it, was the number of part-timers that would be converted to full-time status. I mean, anything under 10,000 investors saw as a win, and they agreed to 7,500. But here's where, during the first year of the proposed contract, part-timers would get $21 an hour, not the $25 minimum many have been fighting for. And additionally, the catch-up raises for workers with seniority would only amount to 50 cents for every 5 years of work. And these raises would be capped at $1.50 after 15 years. So you can only get $22.50. So part-timers who've been at UPS between 5 and 10 will go up to $21.50, which is just 50 cents more than a new hire. So
why?
Well, because
Why?
That's the two-tier wage system. But experienced drivers should still make a little bit more than their counterparts, more than 50 cents an hour more than new hires that are completely
inexperienced. The issue is that it's all part-time gigs, so there isn't any experienced positions in that, right? Right. You know what I mean? Like, if a majority of it is new hires, then which they're doing deliberately so that they don't have to pay people.
Yep.
They're more than willing to have turnover.
Yes. And more than 100% turnover. They're hiring and rehiring people back.
Right.
Yeah. In order to be able to meet this goal. We had which
tells you the quality of work in the area anyway.
We had another chat that I missed over on the Rockfin from Roger Meadows from earlier.
Roger.
And he says, when I was taking
$3 when I was.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, $2 to tip. When I was taking 3-hour trips upstate to Albany to witness people testify in front of the New York State Senate, was doing around the New York Healthcare Act, I remember that there were emails recovered by private health insurance with the executive boards or whoever in charge handed down these memos addressing those dying to drag it out in court until they die so we can just write it off. Oh, and then he's got another one. Yep, time to bypass.
Roger Meadows with another $2.
Ooh, okay, you can read that.
Time to bypass unions in the private sector and go straight to worker cooperatives. The truth is staring us right in the face when we just must have the courage to take that first step through that door, because this would be blazing a new trail. We are currently going with what we know, but I can't help but to feel that this is insane.
Right.
In the membrane, in fact, Roger Meadows.
Yeah.
And yes, cooperative is far better. I mean, the issue is that they're not even willing to fight for crumbs in their union, let alone understand or willing to fight for cooperatives.
Yeah.
So while I feel you, the education in that department is lacking. Especially when our union leaders are more willing to just go do speaking gigs at Vogue and Gucci. So, take a trip to Cuba every once in a while.
We covered this last week.
I'm sorry.
But $49 an hour for drivers, for the top pay for drivers at the end of the contract, with starters just getting $23 an hour for part-timers. It's a big... All right. So for every improvement the bosses give drivers, we need to fight for the same for our union siblings working part-time. All right. So with billions of profits year after year, UPS has more than enough money to pay decent wages and benefits for all workers, whether driver, preloader, all workers. We all break our backs and bodies every day to make record profits for our bosses. We are
driver.
one union. Yep. Just mess. And then there's even
Driver, preloader, fluffer.
shortcomings for drivers. This one, the personal vehicle drivers. This is what drove me crazy. The drivers are actually going to have to use their own cars.
Well, they're already doing that. Well, I mean, you think about like, there's an Amazon service that's similar too. They're trying to compete with things like Uber Eats and whatever. These companies that are willing to forfeit your car's like operating ability for their benefit.
Yep.
You know, so like you're paying all overhead and you're taking every bit of damage to your car. The mileage just goes up while you get a stipend, barely anything. So,
and
you know, and it's essentially your payment is then derivative of how much you are willing to destroy your car based off like, are you willing to do it in peak hours? Are you willing to do it? You know, like how much are you willing to do it? How many gigs can you complete? You know, so
and the number is ridiculous.
Really, you suffer, they win.
The guy has to do like 155 deliveries in a 100-mile route in like 8 hours. It's ridiculous. Wow. But here you go. Only 28,000 package cars. About a third of the fleet are going to happen during the agreement's duration that they're going to get air conditioning. So more than 60,000 trucks. A third
of the fleet. A third. So you're telling me what's called a majority, 2/3, will not be air conditioned. 2/3.
They'll get fans.
Only fans, I guess.
Yep.
Like, what? It's fucking 2023. What are we, the Amish and horse and buggies? Like, you got to put AC in a fucking giant metal box if you want your workers to stay there.
Benton preloads.
Good for you.
Look at that. UPS made over $100 billion in revenue just last year on the backs of our labor. CEO and board members have been paid millions. Their shareholders, the Vanguard Group and JP Morgan, are among the wealthiest and largest investment funds in the world, yet the company claims this is the best contract that we can get. They claim they can't provide part-timers.
Of course it's the Vanguard.
Yeah,
they all want you to just go.
And I live in a van down by the river.
Right.
No, I know, not those. I'm talking about Vanguard Group, as in the terrible Diet BlackRock.
That's them. Right. So UPS bosses want to keep making massive profits while fostering divisions between part-timers and drivers, making us fight over crumbs. For weeks and months in rallies and practice pickets and parking lot meetings, we all stood shoulder to shoulder, making it clear that we stand together. And then Sean O'Brien caved and it all disappeared. But here's our list of demands. AC systems in all cars and warehouses. No more PVDs. Longer breaks for part-timers. At least 4 hours of guaranteed daily work. They're not doing any of these things. And we're not alone in this struggle. Already from New York to Texas to Georgia, UPS workers across the country are beginning to organize that fight. Good. So this guy, one of these photos, I think it was this one, from this tweet.
We've seen these photos exactly, I think.
Yep. I used one of these last week.
I think you brought these up last week.
Yep.
I think you used all 4 of them in the show.
It was from that tweet that he had that in. No, right. That was after our show, so I don't think so.
Huh?
No, it was the 30th.
No, it was definitely. 30th. I remember the X's.
Yep. Well, a lot more people are doing the X's.
At least 2 of them.
So, on top of that, there's our X's. We also had this, which is UPS drivers are sharing the thermometer reads from inside their trucks.
117. Yep. 117. And I want you to realize that's the back of the truck, right? The front of the truck might be worse. The back of the truck is where your loaders, your preloaders, your offloaders, like those, that's who are in there. Like, a goodbye chocolate, if that's what you ordered. Like, everything's melting in there.
Oh yeah, they're
that's
ovens.
Prolonged 117. You could like cook food at that temperature.
Basically, yeah.
Like,
That's why they put stuff in like dry ice. If you don't pack it in something like that, I mean, wow.
Like that next one, what is that next one? Surface temperature
it's like 121.4
something?
It's
Or
121.4. It's 121.4. But that's cut
Jesus
off there.
Christ.
Yeah. It says UPS CEOs would
I
never
say make
accept
those
working,
fuckers work in a 100-degree office.
Right, but they can't even turn the thermostats up that high. And the driver shouldn't have
kidnapping's
to
a thing
either.
in Minecraft.